Hey guys, my name's Rai. Today, I wanted to go over how I did my plus 18 Dawnbreaker on my Chrono Ward and Preservation Evoker. It's been a minute since I put out a video as I've been pretty busy with a new job, but don't forget that I did promise that I was going to keep doing these. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you how to handle every healing check, how I did this with no Death Knight into very squishy classes, and pretty much just one-shot this keystone using the Koi talent setup that I like to play. I'm going to pause this quick as I do go over a couple things. Our tier set right now is busted, and I'm going to show you all the tricks that you need to be able to utilize your Tip the Scales Temporal Burst on some of these encounters, how to handle the healing check on the first boss and make it an absolute joke, and get through this keystone pretty easily. In this first pack, I would always recommend that you have something set up. Watch very carefully here as I go in here. I am playing Time Spiral because I'm playing with an Elemental Shaman, but immediately I'm going to rescue up my Shaman, give him some distance, set out a Temporal Anomaly, get those reversions out for that Grace Period effect, and then Echo, 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 Stasis, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. Remember, in these kinds of packs, what matters first is getting your throughput out, and watch how very safe my team is throughout this pull. But kind of the idea is that you always want to make sure that you're putting out echoes to generate that lifebind effect. On these pulls, you never know when a kick is going to be missed, when you're going to be targeted, and I'm going to show you a couple tips. Usually, 2 people can't be targeted in a row by the Tormenting Beam. Once the first 2 people are picked, you know automatically that the next Tormenting Beam is going to target 2 of your DPS players, meaning that you can always game this. Watch as there as I start to precast Spirit Bloom on myself to make sure that I had some healing set up for that next part of that Ritualist cast. Why I say you can pop everything in the first pull is that it's going to be back up midway through the last pull here. Look at my stasis cooldown at 40 seconds. By the time that we kind of get situated in this pull and kind of set up, I'm going to have stasis back. I am using Tip the Scales on cooldown, as with our new tier set, you want to just be slamming that as much as humanly possible. I cauterize my tank, I tip the scales, and immediately watch as I'm into those Echo, 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 Lifebind, Temporal Anomaly. Now I use Spirit Bloom and that Dream Breath to kind of get through the pack. Watch here as I did get double casted by both Bolt and the Stygian Seed, and I hit Emerald Communion for that 20% life increase. Once I'm back in stasis here in 2, 1, I will have infinite healing for the rest of this pack, and I want to use it towards the end of Bloodlust when we start running out of defensives. Watch immediately there as I just use whatever it takes to get through this pack. If you watched my video in Season 1, as I did the world's only Dawnbreaker on Preservation Evoker on 18, you'll notice that there are a lot of similar trends. Our gameplay hasn't changed much, but our throughput now is insane. And I would say that your prerogative first always before hitting those offensive living flames is make sure that you get those healing ramps off and that your team is protected. Never, ever, ever go into this pack just thinking you're going to be hitting Chrono Flame the whole time. When you're getting set up, keep going into that combo of Echo, 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 Burden Embrace, Spirit Bloom. I had somebody ask me in my Discord the other day, right, is it important that your tank gets part of that Spirit Bloom lifebind effects? I would say as you go up in key level, it becomes increasingly more important. The reason why is your tank can take a lot of damage, and this season if you're playing with a Brewmaster, a Prot Paladin, or even a Prot Warrior, including them in Lifebind is going to help them immensely. As we kind of get through this pack, you'll notice that I am doing a lot of damage, and I'm mostly just focused on hitting that Fire Breath off CD and that Living Flame. Anytime you have a DPS targeted by this web wrap, you want to make sure that they have a defensive. If you're not in Discord with them and you see them are heading in defensive, this is a great place to use Time Dilation. I would say that on the boat with the 4 mobs as opposed to the boat with 3 mobs, your tank needs a little bit less love, but again, you should be trying to include them in the healing ramp if you can. Again, watch here carefully as every single time I get a web wrap, I'm going to be pressing either Obsidian Scales or Renewing Blaze. For the last web wrap of the fight there, you'll notice that the expiration doesn't go off and I won't get the last hit. If the mob does happen to die while you have the debuff on you, you'll still take the damage, but you're not going to take that final tick, so you don't need to press too much. As the web goes on my druid, he melds, and it goes onto my shaman who doesn't really have any defensives. Watch here as I set up my healing ramp, and I hit a big Spirit Bloom on him as he hits Bulwark, and he's instantly topped. One thing to pay attention to here is my mana bar. You'll notice that I'm at 20% mana, and I've been spending quite aggressively. Preservation Evoker this season does spend a ton of mana because of the cost of Temporal Anomaly and how much you're going to be just spitting out damage and as well all the haste that you have from your CDR and your TA. What I really do is I can play most of the game on 20% mana, right? And you'll notice here that when I have downtime, I'm just weaving in those disintegrates. Kind of what your goal should be is using Chrono Flame as much as humanly possible while that Temporal Burst ability is active, and then when you need a little bit of regeneration time and your Temporal Burst is faded, you can kind of put more into those disintegrates. Watch here as my tank starts dropping pretty low as he's going to take that Commander Bleed as well as those bolts. Remember too that these Tainted Slashes are cauterizable, but it is on a 1-minute CD. If you do find that your tank is struggling here, this is a great time where you can use a stasis combo of, putting a cauterize within your stasis. What that might look like is stasis, Spirit Bloom, cauterize, and then Dream Breath. As I'm getting prepared for the first boss here, here's all the tips that you need to be successful. You want to make sure you have stasis available, you want to make sure you have Tip the Scales, and that is absolutely all you need. I'm going to show you how to do this boss very easily with just stasis and Tip the Scales as well as your own defensives. You shouldn't need Rewind, you should need Emerald Communion, but if you do need them to fill gaps, feel free to use them and plan accordingly. You're going to see that right off the gate here, I use Tip the Scales right into Fire Breath to get Temporal Burst active. The reason why I use it here is it's going to line up very, very, very nicely for the third Burning Shadows of the encounter. Once I can get over the first couple Burning Shadows, this fight gets aggressively easier. Now, watch here as I Fire Breath, and all the damage that I'm doing is just going to be funneled into healing my team. I'm hitting some disintegrates to stay mana neutral, and all I'm doing over and over again is using Temporal Anomaly and that reversion, and watch very carefully here how me just hitting damaging abilities tops up my team. As soon as this first Obsidian Beam ends, I'm going to be going into that Echo, Echo, Echo combo where I'm going to be using my first stasis combo of the fight. I use that Verdant Embrace, I use that stasis, I use a big Spirit Bloom, and I get topped with TA and Dream Breath. What's really nice is that the second Burning Shadows of the fight is an overlap, meaning that it's going to happen with Obsidian Beam. So I have that Echo, Echo, Echo out, I dispel my DPS player, I Verdant Embrace, I release my stasis, and my team is stopped. If you're going to be telling your team to use any sort of defensives, that's going to be the one that you wanted on Preservation. Now, look very carefully here how my Tip the Scales is coming right back up for that third Burning Shadows. Remember, I came into this key not knowing what to expect, and we pretty much just one-shot this encounter very easily, and I've pretty much done so on every key level. So again, Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Tip the Scale Spirit Bloom, and my team is topped. Any of this triage damage now is going to be handled by Chrono Flame from our Temporal Burst window, and I'm just going to be hitting those Living Flames into the boss. Echo, Echo, Echo is set up for that next Burning Shadows, and I'm just back to hitting Chrono Flame. You see very carefully here that I have those Echoes set up, I Dispel, I Verdant Embrace, I hit a Life Spark from that Call of Ysera into Spirit Bloom, and my team is stopped. As we go into this next combo here, we are going to be pushing the boss, so I need to know if I'm going to be setting up for that Echo Echo or not. We do beat the darkness, and as you can see, I did that entire phase with just Echo Echo Echo, Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom, or Life Spark. I did kind of cheese a little bit at the end there. Anytime that there's a boss that takes 0 damage, that is a great time to hit that energy loop for that Disintegrate. So I did manage to get a little bit of mana back before I flew off. There's no rush to get off the boat, so if you want to use a couple Disintegrates, get some mana, now's a great time to do so. I hit Time Spiral for my Shaman, and now I'm into Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom with Stasis, and my team's going to be topped really, really fast. You'll see that now, because I used that Tip the Scales early at the start of the fight, it's perfectly lined up for the rest of the encounter. I would really recommend, just when you start this encounter, slamming it on CD, and it's going to give you a great time for the rest of this encounter cadence. Now that I have Stasis set up for the next one, this next Burning Shadows is going to be instantly dropped. I hit my Shaman with that Verdant Embrace, I release my Stasis, and look how quickly my team is topped up. I don't think there's any other healer in the game that can heal this encounter like this. It's actually pretty insane. So if you are struggling with this on Prez, just follow these couple tricks, right? Like I did this the first time, it worked really well, and I realized how insanely overpowered our tier set is. Like, right, this was my first time kind of trying to get through this boss encounter. Again, I have that Life Spark Koi there into Spirit Bloom, and my team is pretty much topped. I did spend a little bit more time there topping my team, as I should have. I think we were chatting in Discord about what we wanted to do next. But as you can see, right, I haven't used Emerald Communion, I haven't used Rewinds, I just alternate using any buttons I need, and now I can easily hit that Verdant Embrace, tip the scale Spirit Bloom, and my team is topped. Again, I think it's just absolutely so cool now that every time I hit tip the scales, my Chrono Flame is just cleaving to my allies and healing them up from all that trios damage. Like, watch as the Obsidian Beam comes out, all I'm doing is just hitting Chrono Flame over and over and over again, Disintegrate for mana, Chrono Flame, top my team, boom, boom, and my team is ready to go. As we fly off the boat here, I do need a couple things. This next pack is going to be pretty scary. If you watched my Dawnbreaker Season 1 video, you'll know that this route probably hasn't changed too much, though there are a couple quirks, and I'm going to show you some really cool tech we do towards the end of this this dungeon. But again, my team's really squishy, so in dealing with any of these mini-bosses and dealing with these packs, I need to be very careful with pre-healing. Now, watch as I go into this pack here, and I have Echoes set up. I don't have tip the scales for 9 seconds, but I do have Stasis, I do have Rewinds, I do have Emerald Communion, I do have that Obsidian Scales if I need. And what I'm going to be doing here is also working with my monk to use a pressing roar with his leg sweep. Now, if you're playing with a monk or a class that has a long stun, you can use a pressing roar to basically help your tank reset all of their stacks. Watch as I go in here with that big fire breath, tops up my team, and now I'm just making sure that my team is topped up with that stasis. I did have to cut my Spirit Bloom short, so I think I only have a rank 2 Spirit Bloom in my stasis right now, which sucks, but it is more than enough to be able to get through this. My tip the scales is back, and so what am I going to be doing? I'm just going to be slamming it now on cooldown. See how I hit that oppressing roar there? We're going to see that leg sweep come out from our monk, and he's going to be resetting his stacks, but we did end up using that cap totem instead. I hit tip the scales with a Spirit Bloom, and now I'm including everybody in my healing ramp as I get topped. Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, and there I used Fit Fire Breath to get that Life Giver's Flame effect. Again, this pool should be pretty easy once you kind of get the hang of it, but there is a lot of healing. As you can see, like, I'm doing 5.5 million HPS in this pool. There's a lot of little random damage that goes out, there's a lot of tank damage, and you want to make sure that everybody, including your tank, is included in these healing ramps. Remember, my first and foremost is not damage, it's making sure that I get those Echoes out into that Verdant Embrace combo and hit those Spirit Blooms and those Life Spark combos. Another question I was asked this week was Rai. I noticed that there are some people playing without Call of Ysera. When and when don't you play with Call of Ysera, and do you think it's mandatory this season? I don't think anything is ever mandatory, and I think whatever you're feeling comfortable with to heal some of these keys is going to be great. I think Call of Ysera, specifically in Floodgates and Dawnbreaker, is just so broken, and I think you're going to have a much easier time playing with it. Remember too, I have no loomithars, I'm not playing with a Death Knight, and I'm just going in here, right, like into an 18 and healing this very easily. I think my team was pretty impressed with how strong preservation was after this keystone, and I think like it's just a testament to like how well the tuning is right now, right? This is definitely the best preservation has been tuned since the release, and I think that, again, you can choose any combination of talents and probably be pretty successful. But even with that in mind, that doesn't mean that some talents are not better than others, and I think that Call of Ysera, specifically in a dungeon where you're going to be getting a ton of Life Spark Koi value, is just, you know, it's insane, right? Like, anyway, anytime here that I'm getting targeted by this debuff, I am going to be hitting Obsidian Scales or Renewing Blaze or releasing a big healing combo on myself. You're going to see that specifically on this mini-boss, I get targeted by almost every single debuff towards the end, and I have a little bit of a tough time. I think ultimately though, what I'm trying to showcase is that, you know, you can get through these pretty easily just using those Life Spark combos and making effect of that grace period. See here as I pre-hover to get that 20% damage reduction on that initial hit, and I'm healing myself up as much as I can through this oncoming damage. As I get another debuff on me, all I have is a charge of Obsidian Scales and Time Dilation. I do hit that Time Dilation on myself as I really want to save a charge of Obsidian Scales for the next pack. But here, again, I get targeted. Again, I have TD ticking on me, and I had to hit that last charge of Scales so I don't die. This sucks, as now we're going to be going to Grandma's house, and all I have is Tip the Scales Stasis, Communion, no Rewind, but I have no defensive abilities, and I'm at 20% mana. My monk is straight in here as I go set up my first healing ramp. I think we get really, really lucky here as our very first debuff is on the warrior, which means that he is reflecting. Again, I'm going to be including my tank as much as I can in these healing combos. I go Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Stasis, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. As I get this debuff on me, I do hit Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales. Depending on the key level, you can probably get away with only hitting one of those two buttons. Scales or Renewing Blaze is really good. But however, you could see that we had those little oozes exploding. I'm going to pause here for a second. A big change compared to Season 1 is that these oozes that you pull over here, they now give counts, but when they die, they also explode. When fighting them, and this is why I hit both Obsidian Scales and Renewing Blaze, is that that explosion could have almost killed me. We're going to go back 10 seconds and watch very carefully as these two oozes explode. I'm in Scales and Blaze, I have a full stasis set up, and watch how low I dip with that combination of spells. This is why you should always respect mobs in whatever dungeon level you're doing, because you just don't know, right? Like, I wasn't sure how hard these mobs are going to hit, as I hadn't really had practice on this key level before. On the first AoE, I released my stasis, and my team stopped. But now, we're pretty much set up and caught up for the rest of this pull, and I'm just trying to alternate and weave in some of those disintegrates to stay mana neutral. Remember, my damage doesn't matter that much, all that matters is that my team is healthy and topped. I released that stasis to get my team topped up, and I hit that tip the scales to be back in Temporal Burst. A really nice thing about Koi too is that your initial Dream Breath is going to be hitting 40% harder if you choose to charge it out. So in a situation like that, and why I really like Koi, is that when I didn't have a Spirit Bloom, you know, I didn't really want to slam Rewinds on this, as I'm going to want it on the next mini boss. That was like a great way I could just instantly top my team with a powerful Dream Breath. My Druid does end up having to sit this here, and he decides that he's not going to hit Bark as he wants it on the next pull. I do manage to kind of get him topped up here as he survives with 1 tick left. I don't know if that would have been the best play. I think hitting Bark would have been safe, as he's probably going to get it back. But, you know, we're at this point. We're now 14 minutes in the key. Nobody's died. I get a sip, and I'm on to the last pull of the dungeon. We only have 2 pulls left, and then the boss. So right at this point, I want absolutely everything for this pull. Remember, I do have a warrior for reflect, but I don't really have a tanky class that can sit and kind of eat some of these. So anytime that my druid doesn't have bark, or my shaman doesn't have shift, I'm going to need to make sure I use time dilation on them. For the very first AoE of this fight, I'm going to be using Zephyr as well. We decide not to pull these unstable darknesses as we don't need them, but we're going to be very careful here on this pull. As our druid gets our first debuff, he does hit Barkskin. I'm in Echo, 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 Stasis, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. You'll notice here that I still haven't hit Temporal Burst, as I'm going to want to hit it here in a second as we were already in Lust. This was a decision I made because I thought in my head, like, hey, maybe if I like save my Temporal Burst a little later, it'll spread out my stasis, it'll spread out my my haste capabilities on this encounter, and it'll give me a little bit more coverage over the entire mini boss. I actually don't think that was right now that I did it. I think I should probably just slammed stasis in the opener. But as you'll see here, I actually held my stasis and released it all the way late, thinking that I might have needed it, but I probably could have released it a little bit earlier too and saved myself a Spirit Bloom. So that was a mistake that I did make, but mostly the cadence in this pull is going to be Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Spirit Bloom, TA, and then Dream Breath. Always be putting that TD on targets that don't have any living capabilities, and whenever the debuff is on you, you should be using things like Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales. If you are ever getting the overlap, that is the time where you absolutely want to hit both Blaze and Scales, as the overlap with the ball is what's going to kill you. You'll probably have seen there a couple seconds ago that I almost did go down, but it was pretty timed. I knew I was going to live with just that Blaze and that Rewind. However, you know, one more tick and I could have just gone down. Our tank is going inside the house here, and he's going to be pulling out a bunch of mobs. This is going to be the last pull that we do in the dungeon before our 2 bosses, so what he's going to be doing is going upstairs, grabbing a bunch of mobs, bringing them down here, and we're just going to be fighting in the courtyard. This is kind of our break pull in the dungeon, and we're going to do 1 pull during the last boss, which is some pretty insane tech that some of you might not have seen yet, but I will kind of explain it as we get there. I think all in all, this dungeon now is a really good pres dungeon. I think it's always been. I think what's really cool now is we actually get to showcase it that we have a strong tier set and some pretty good tuning. It doesn't really matter what kind of pull your tank does here. I assume you're either going to be doing like a pull like this, or maybe going up on those bridges and doing some of those big backs, but this pull should be pretty easy. One thing that I'm going to note though, and you might remember from some other videos, is anytime I'm going into like a boss, like the next boss, which might be one of the hardest healing checks of the season, I want everything ready. This whole dungeon, I've been hitting tip the scales off cooldown, making sure that it's available and, you know, up for almost every start of every trash pack. I don't think you ever really need to hold it, but I want to show you one hold that I did do that I really liked on the next boss, as it kind of fixed all my cadence problems as well. So right now, I'm holding on to stasis. I'm going to have rewind late, I'm going to have communion late, and your number one thing is no matter what route you do, you want to make sure you have Emerald Communion for the minute 30 mark on this next boss. Although you can probably get through it with that, you know, Temporal Burst, tip the scales, I'm really going to recommend that you always have Emerald Communion for the overlap, which happens at about 1:30 on the next encounter. Anubikkaj is still pretty systematically designed well for Prez, however, it's very easy to kind of like make some mistakes, and especially to, again, with my composition not having like a very tanky class like a mage or a death knight, I have to be a little careful about how I plan out my healing CDs. As this tactician's going down, my team's priority damage might have shifted. We do waste quite a bit of time fighting this one tactician. I think this is like 15 seconds, which is crazy. We waste a ton of time here, but that's okay. We are going to be mounting up, and we're going to be going straight into boss. You're going to notice anytime on this boss an orb explodes, I am just basically stacking my team with temporal anomaly shields. TA shields are insane this season, and you're going to see how much that shielding is, as they're able to cover a lot of the initial damage. I throw that TA out, I am going to be rescuing my shaman just to get a little bit of a buffer, and for that very first AoE, you're going to see that I Temporal Burst with tip the scales, I get a Dream Breath out, and I go into my life bind after the damage starts. You can see that I did utilize that Life Spark proc with that Life Bind to get my team topped, and then I release my Stasis, which should cover the entire damage event. What I have noticed on this fight, and some Preservation Evokers have struggled with in the past and Season 1, is that they Life Bind too early on this encounter. Remember, because we lost the last season's set bonus, we don't have infinite Life Bind now. Although we have a lot of haste, it is a little bit slower, and you need to be a little bit careful. As you'll see, I put Grace Periods up on everybody, and I'm doing that Echo. Life Bind into that Dream Breath, and I'll be hitting Life Spark proc, and just Life Spark proc topping my party. I probably could have been a little bit more aggressive there, but honestly, that's all we really needed, right? Like, I had a good defensive run-in, and now up for the next AoE at the 1 minute mark, I am going to have Temporal Burst, which I'm going to be using here with Spirit Bloom, which is now going to give me that 30% haste and that Temporal Burst buff for the overlap. This next orb is the overlap of the fight, and I would recommend always saving a charge of Obsidian Scales, Zephyr, or that Renewing Blaze, kind of depending on which combination of abilities you like. But you're going to see that I Echo, I Burn Embrace, I Zephyr, I Life Spark proc, and I go into Emerald Communion. The reason why I Life Spark proc first is Emerald Communion is going to expire before that Shadowy Decay is done, so if your team doesn't have adequate defensives, it's not going to be able to cover enough healing for the entire thing. This is specifically why I really like desyncing that Temporal Burst here, as now it's going to be up for the next AoE of the fight. This fight is all about learning how to heal a damage pattern over more than your Life Bind window. Since Life Bind only lasts less than 6 seconds, you know, you want to be very careful about how you do some of these sequences. So as you'll see here, I set up Stasis, I tip the scales, I TA, and I get everybody topped. Echo, Burn Embrace, Life Spark proc, and then I release my Stasis. And you'll see that my team doesn't take any damage at all there. I think it's kind of crazy that everything I kind of practiced in Season 1 still applies now. Going into the encounter like this, we have 0 deaths in the key, and this is just all clockwork for me, right? Like, obviously I'm not very geared yet. I think I'm 612 or 613 here. I'm basically just following every principle I did from 2 seasons ago and making this dungeon very easy. I think if you have a Loomithar's Living Silk, this encounter specifically is also going to be quite a bit easier. As we go into this next Shadowy Decay, again, Echo, Life Spark with that Burn Embrace, and then I hit Rewind. My team is topped. So now one important thing here is I need to start thinking about the end of this encounter. The next mini-boss is a pain point for every group and can be very difficult. So I want to make sure that as this boss dies, I'm starting to think about what I need to fight the mini-boss upstairs. Ideally, I don't send this stasis in 30 seconds, but as well, I need to make sure that my team lives. I hit that tip to scales as I'm using it off cooldown. I throw TA out, I put those grace periods out, and now we're gonna have to deal with the second overlap of the fight, which is coming in at 340. This is the only time somebody dies in this entire keystone, but it's not even because of the overlap itself, it's actually because we missed a cast. I do time dilate my shaman, my team doesn't really have any stops, we only have Typhoon. I hit Renewing Blaze, I hit a very big Spirit Bloom, my team health pots, and we're a little bit behind, but we do manage to get topped up. We opt here not to res our druid, but again, this wasn't really my fault. He would have lived if we just used any stop or any kick. We had a ton of kicks up and a ton of utility, and we all just kind of panicked, so. As we kind of get up top here, we are going to be going up to the boat. And remember what I kind of talked about is I want to start thinking about what I need for the boat. I want stasis, I want communion, I want tip the scales, and I want rewind. This mini boss follows all the principles of the tormenting beam mobs that I talked about earlier in the keystone, meaning that once two people are selected once, they can't be selected back to back again. Or at least they shouldn't be. Sometimes the coding messes up, but what you really need to be careful of is this very first set of AoEs. Watch carefully here as I put echoes on everybody, and sometimes I even think about pre-walling. The reason why I can pre-wall is if I don't have a lot of healing, I know that I have a 50-50 chance of that first beam going on me, and at least for that part, I have some coverage. Echo, echo, echo. And we going right into stasis with echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, tip the scale, Spirit Bloom, and my team is going to be topped. And you'll see now that I'm just going to hit some Chrono Flames and some Disintegrates into the Architect to keep my team topped. So now that that went on my first two players, I know for sure that this next beam is going to go on me, no ifs, ands, or buts. Watch carefully here as I don't have my Obsidian Scales, but I do have Renewing Blaze if I need to. And I have a full ramp on my team, including rolling Grace Period on myself. Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, and I release my Stasis. This Architect should be very easy for you on Prez if you come prepared, as long as you follow that rule, knowing that two people shouldn't be able to be targeted back to back. I hit Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, and Emerald Communion to cover this next one, as my Shaman didn't have a wall. Now that I know that my Shaman was just picked again, theoretically he shouldn't be picked, but this should be on me and somebody else, but it does end up going to our tank and our druid. Now that it shows our tank, I know for sure that it's going to be on me next, so it's completely fine if I need to wall. As these enforcements spawn, Echo, Echo, Echo to cover some of the damage, and I know that for sure that this beam is going to go on me. I burdened, I make sure that I kind of get everything top tier, and if I really need to, I can hit that rewind, but I don't have it up. Remember, using that Life Spark proc with that Chrono Flame with Koi is just absolutely insane, and it's going to get you through a lot of these very difficult encounters. As we kind of finish off this mini boss, we're going to be going straight into boss. We have 7 minutes here, but as you can tell, you might notice something a little different. We don't have the count required to meet 100%. One of the new routes that we found out is that in between the intermission after this boss, so we're going to be getting the boss to 64%, we're actually going to be going and fighting a trash pack. Why this is efficient is we have to deal with the RP and sit around anyway. However, we did find out that the RP is scaled to Mythic 0, meaning that when he starts casting his explosion, that it's going to actually only do Mythic 0 damage, meaning it is going to be healed through. However, it starts to ramp very quickly, and over time, you're going to realize that it does hit pretty hard. So we're going to be flying down, fighting some mobs, sending cooldowns, and then going back and fighting the boss. For this first AoE, I don't have Tip the Scales, which is kind of scary, but I do have Stasis. You'll see that my team drops pretty low here, as part of my plan is always make sure I have Stasis Tip on the first one, and then release Stasis on the second one. However, I use Zephyr with Echo, 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 Renewing Blaze, Burn Embrace, Stasis, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. I use that Echo, Echo, Echo. I'm going to be dropping off my bomb here, and my team drops pretty low. I do ask my Shaman to health pots, but the nice thing is I still have Tip the Scales now, and I have a full Stasis release, meaning the next one is going to be extremely comfy. Again, this was a mistake. I ideally would have liked to have Tip the Scales on pull for the first one, and then you just use Tip the Scales for first, and then you release Stasis. But watch how late, like I used Tip the Scales first, and then my Stasis is going to release after for like a ton of healing, so At this point, because I'm in Tip the Scales, I can also just opt to hit Chrono Flame if I need to, and it's just going to top up my team. As you can see right now, the RP is going on for another 30 seconds, and we decide that we're going to go fight this trash back. So flying over here, you're going to notice in 24, 23, 22 seconds on the right hand side of my screen, the boss is going to finish his RP and start dealing AoE damage to us. Ideally here, your damage dealers are sending a ton of damage because you're actually on a finite timer. If this cast goes on too long and this pack isn't dead, this boss is going to nuke us, and you're going to notice that occasionally towards the end of this pack, we're going to be taking a lot of damage, which means that I do need to put out a little bit of healing. These tacticians have a ton of health, and we actually didn't have any of our DPS sent on this, which starts to be a problem. You'll notice here that from going to a very easy, trash back, I'm going to start to have to heal a lot of this AoE taking damage. Towards the end, I'm going to have to use a charge of Obsidian Scales and Wall. Ideally here though, our Shaman just would have ended up sending Ascendance, and then we would have just had a longer boss, because this starts to get a little bit dicey. So you can see our Shaman and our Druid are holding their damage this pull. I do hit that Spirit Bloom. I am hitting as much damage as I possibly can. I did use Tip on this counter, but now we have to beat up this Tactician, and you're going to notice that our health is slowly ticking down. I go Echo, Echo, Echo. Burn Embrace. I keep grace periods out, and now I need to make sure that I hit a wall before I take off. I put hots on absolutely everybody so that in the air they're being able to be healed up a little bit. I hit that Obsidian Scales, and you're going to watch here that our team starts to dip dangerously low before we die, or before we fall. The whole idea is that if you die in the air, it's just cooked. You're not making it back, so you need to be making sure that you make it back in time. I'm going to show you guys how to heal Rashanon so easily. I thought that this was an absolute joke on Preservation Evoker with our tier set, and here are all the tips you need. Don't use Tip the Scales right away. Make sure you use it for the first erosive spray of the fight. On the first erosive spray, you're going to be in Bloodlust, you're going to have Stasis, and you're going to Tip the Scales. And you're going to notice that often when I'm in Tip the Scales on this encounter, my Chrono Flames handle a lot of the healing passively. You want to be using an alternating Renewing Blaze and Obsidian Scales on each erosive spray, and using Time Dilation and Rescue on your teammates when they don't have defensives. As Rashanon's coming out, I'm trying to stay mana neutral. Look very carefully at how much I'm using Disintegrate here, and making sure that I have enough mana to get me through the fight. My Druid actually didn't take Innervate in here, which is kind of crazy. Innervate's like exceptionally useful in this encounter, and a lot of these encounters in Dawnbreaker, so I had to play a little bit more conservatively, but as you see, I go into Echo, Echo, Echo. I hit that Renewing Blaze, I Burn Embrace, I Stasis, Tip the Scales, Spirit Bloom, Temporal Anomaly, and Dream Breath. And watch now as I'm just slamming Chrono Flames into the boss and using a little bit of passive healing where I can. Again, I want to be making sure I'm mana neutral here and using Disintegrate as much as possible to get topped. Next Erosive Spray comes out, Echo, 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 Obsidian Scales, Burn Embrace, Release Stasis, and now I have an extra Spirit Bloom to kind of mess around with late. So I go into that hard Spirit Bloom cast, and now I'm just topping up my team. This encounter should be really easy if you just follow this cadence, and making sure that your team is popping those defensives as needed. Anytime that the Spinettes come out, or Spinnerets, you want to make sure they also have an Echo up in your team. An Echo Golden Hour should cover a lot of the damage. I would recommend trying not to Lifebind, as you're really going to want it on that Erosive Spray. Erosive Spray comes out, again I'm using Obsidian Scales for Renewing Blaze, and now I'm in Tip the Scales, which means like now I'm just going to be hitting Chrono Flame, and it's going to be topping up my team very easily. Watch carefully as how my team goes from 50% to 100 over and over and over again, just because of how much haste I have playing with that Temporal Anomaly, or that Temporal Burst. I do rescue my Shaman back, as he only had Bulwark, and now I'm back to just hitting the boss. This next set is going to be my Stasis again, as I get set up with that Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Stasis, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. Basically, anytime you have tip, you need to not actually press too much, but anytime you don't have tip, you need to compensate for having something like stasis, like Emerald Communion, or like Rewind. But notice how we've been in the boss combat now for 530. That's including that really long RP with the trash. But I still haven't used Emerald Communion. I haven't even hit Rewind, right? Like, this whole keystone has been very, very easy on preservation for me to kind of get topped. And I didn't really have any problems. As this Erosive Spray comes out, again, we're back in Tip to Scales, and we're just using that Tip to Scales with Spirit Bloom to top up our team. Chrono Flame handles a lot of the incoming healing, and now we're just back to blasting the boss. I think we end up getting one more of that Erosive Spray for the fight. I rescue my Druid back in, and now all I need to do is slam Emerald Communion or Rewind, and, you know, the fight should be over. Erosive Spray, Echo, 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 into Emerald Communion, and my team is topped. If I really wanted to here, remember I do have Rewind too, but if you look at my cooldowns, if we had to handle another one, I just would have been back and tipped the skills anyway. Overall, I think Prez is awesome right now. We're in such a cool state. I think, you know, we do a ton of healing, we do a lot of damage, and I think it's a lot of fun. Hopefully this video helped you be able to conquer your Dawnbreaker on your journey of getting title this season, or, you know, just playing Mythic Plus for fun. Hopefully this also showcases you too, if you decide to re-overall off Prez, to maybe give it another chance. I think Prez is in such a broken state right now, and probably the best it's ever been tuned. With that in mind, thanks for watching, and thanks for tuning in. I'm sorry I haven't been able to put out a ton of content lately, as I've been really busy, and I love my new job a lot, but it does require me to be in office 5 days. I'm not planning on pushing really hard until Turbo Boost, but hopefully now and in between then I do post more videos showcasing some preservation content and highlighting, because I still do plan on going pretty hard after Turbo Boost, as I don't really think IO matters too much right now. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.